Good afternoon, Wahoos. I'm Liz Brown-Kaiser.
And I'm Mary Rockwell.
Welcome to UVA Department of Media Studies' first ever live broadcast of the UVA Bicentennial.
It was 200 years ago today that former presidents Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and sitting President James Monroe was present here on the lawn for the laying of the university cornerstone. They were the headliners on October 6, 1817, here on the lawn.
Let's take a look at the lawn today. As you can see, there are huge stages and decorations everywhere, and in just hours from now, 20,000 spectators will gather here on the lawn to see tonight's headliners. These include the Goo Goo Dolls, R&B legend Andra Day, and Leslie Odom Jr.
Thanks, Liz. The opening ceremony of the Bicentennial is happening right behind us. We heard from co-chair of the Bicentennial Commission, Bobby Battle, where he laid out the challenges of the next 200 years at UVA.
Well, Virginia, the world is calling, and how are we going to answer? As our third century unfolds, and Tom Farrell's going to be doing a lot of work on that in the next few months, defining the role of higher education in our society, we will unfold the open arms of public higher education, and we must embrace people of all races, religion, genders, and gender identities.
Let's think back to 1817, at a time when UVA grounds were just wilderness. To talk to us about how Jefferson transformed wilderness into a renowned university, we have Tucker Wilson here with us, the historian of UVA Guides. Thank you for joining us, Tucker.
Thank y'all.
First, can you tell me how exactly Thomas Jefferson actually established UVA? Did the General Assembly just give him the money to go for it?
Absolutely not. It was a long road for Jefferson to get from basically nothing to his very own chartered university. I think the story starts around 1814. In that year, Thomas Jefferson is appointed a trustee to what's called Albemarle Academy. Albemarle Academy was a prep school for boys in Charlottesville, but the project had never really gotten off the ground. At this point, the academy basically only existed on paper. In that year, though, that Jefferson was appointed, the board met to revitalize the project, to actually get groundwork started on this institution. Now, public education had really been a lifelong pursuit of Jefferson's. He believed that an educated citizenry was the only way to maintain America, that the freedoms that are given to us in the Constitution could only be protected if we understood them. And so in Albemarle Academy, Jefferson didn't just see a prep school. He saw an opportunity to contribute to that educated citizenry with an institution of his very own. And so in that same year, he suggested to the board to rename Albemarle Academy to the Central College. And I think it's at that moment that he begins to implant this idea of a central university into the minds of these statesmen, these educators, these men that would end up funding UVA that we know today.
So we heard earlier from President Sullivan that the first official class of UVA was in 1825. What can you tell us about the first class of students and professors here at UVA?
Yeah, so the first class is definitely not what we imagine here today. The university's relatively high cost and its situation in the South, as well as barriers to women and people of color, meant that we were really only attracting one kind of student, which was white, wealthy Southern men. Professors, on the other hand, were often from Europe. 7 of the 9 original professors were European. They were much older. They had much diverse backgrounds. And you could really see tensions between these two groups forming. Professors were absolutely terrified of their students. They'd be running rampant on the lawn, throwing parties out of their lawn rooms. Favorite pastime of students at the time was called callothumping, where students would mount their horses, ride up and down the lawn on horseback, and shoot at the clock on top of the rotunda.
Wow.
In one dramatic incident, students threw a jar of urine through the window of Pavilion 5, screaming expletives at the professors inside. The professors and the Board of Visitors attempted to calm the students by enforcing a much stricter code of conduct upon them. Dress code was enforced, strict no exceptions curfew was put in place, drinking and smoking were banned outside of your dorm room, but it really only served to make things worse.
Wow.
Tensions got so bad at one point that in 1840, Professor John A.G. Davis, who lived in Pavilion 10, was shot and killed by a student off of his balcony.
Wow.
And I think at that point it's where the shift really begins to happen. The story goes that that event inspired the honor system, a system of trust between students and professors at UVA. The relationship started to become much more constructive, much less destructive, and then we kind of moved into the more serious academic relationship that we have with our professors now.
Wow, well, a lot has changed here at the university in 200
absolutely.
years, but thank you so much, Tucker, for spending the time and telling us a little bit more about the history of our university.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Next, we tackle the question of our founder. Who was the real Thomas Jefferson? Last November, UVA psychology professor Noel Hurd objected to an email sent by university president Teresa Sullivan in which Sullivan quoted Jefferson on the issues of unity and student excellence in the wake of President Trump's election. Hurd's petition, which drew hundreds of signatures, argued that Jefferson the slaveholder should not be held up as heroic. We asked our reporter Harley Robertson to look at this.
Last November, psychology professor Noel Hurd authored a letter to President Teresa Sullivan asking her to stop using Jefferson as a moral compass in her emails. Hurd's letter received 469 signatures from students and faculty and ignited a national debate over how to view Jefferson, the slaveholder or the champion of equal rights. I asked Professor Hurd about this key line in her letter last year, where she argues the inclusion of Jefferson quotes undermines the messages of unity, equality, civility, and inclusivity that Teresa Sullivan is attempting to convey.
This notion of looking to Jefferson for everything, or this notion of kind of putting him up on this pedestal, and leads us into these bizarre spaces where we're talking about issues of bigotry, and then we're using Jefferson quotes, knowing that Jefferson owned over 600 slaves.
For Hurd, Jefferson's prominence in the bicentennial ceremonies bring into question how much UVA has truly progressed and its commitment to diversity.
I don't want to be a part of the bicentennial. So much of this is tied to Jefferson and Madison and Monroe, and there's like such little acknowledgement in any of that of these folks as being slavers, of these folks as committing awful atrocities against humanity.
In her response to Hurd last November, President Teresa Sullivan pushed back, saying that quoting Jefferson does not imply an endorsement of all the social structures and beliefs of his time. Sullivan said Jefferson's most famous quote, that all men are created equal, was contradictory in an era of slavery, but became the fundamental expression of a more genuine equality today. 3 weeks ago, the notion that the University of Virginia should not be synonymous with Jefferson resurfaced after protesters briefly covered the Jefferson statue with the black shroud here on the north side of the rotunda. UVA second year Tanner Hirschfeld, who was there as a counter-protester, calls it despicable to forget that the accusations being brought against Jefferson are the same arguments he pioneered.
If we stop talking about the ideals he advocated for and the legacy he left, then you stop talking about equality for all, justice for all, liberty for all. And that's not something we want to stray from.
Last year, organizers said that all of Jefferson's legacy would be discussed this weekend. But is discussion enough? Or will it take the removal of Jefferson from UVA for the negative claims that shroud his presence here to be lifted? I'm Harley Robertson. Back to you, Liz and Mary.
We have to talk about that part of the UVA community that is not celebrating the bicentennial and does not see Thomas Jefferson only in his role as a founding father. After the white supremacist violence here in August, the Black Student Alliance, with the support of Student Council, put forth a list of 10 demands for UVA to acknowledge its past in excluding minorities. Our own reporter Yahya Abu-Ghazala looked at demand number 5, which would change the UVA curriculum. Yahya, tell us about that.
Thanks for having me. Almost no one is disputing that the history of Jefferson and slavery needs to be discussed or even taught, but where the controversy lies is whether that should be made mandatory for all students. The BSA's main point is that the university needs to focus more class time on the history of white supremacy and slavery at UVA.
Second year Kiera Price is leading the BSA call to either mandate a course or create a curriculum outside the classroom that teaches what she calls a more complete history of UVA.
I think the overall institution of UVA is failing to talk about white supremacy.
And any discussion of white supremacy, she argues, must include the slaveholding past of Thomas Jefferson.
For students to come through here and never engage with the legacy of our founder, with the legacy of various institutions such as slavery that helped create this university, would be a shame.
But UVA's curriculum has not been silent on Jefferson and slavery. It's being taught now in a history course in the college called Slavery and Its Legacies. We visited the course to find out if it might meet the BSA's demand.
He's Jefferson's carpenter and builder and describes the labor force here as nearly all African.
The professor is Kurt Von Dack, and this semester marks the second time the course has been offered. To first-year Kristen Graves, it has been a revelation.
I already came into the school thinking that I knew about UVA, but this class just has opened my eyes so much more to the history and especially like the dark past of UVA.
When we provided Kiara with the syllabus for the course, here was her reaction.
I looked at it, and it's actually amazing. Why aren't we making it available for more students?
So if that course is acceptable, the question remains whether it should be made mandatory and what that process could look like. Some changes to the UVA curriculum can take years.
University Provost Thomas Katsouleas explains that making a course required would need multiple rounds of voting.
It goes through department levels, the faculty senate, then if the faculty senate approves a new curriculum, it comes through this office, the provost and the president approve. It really is the faculty that own the curriculum.
Kiara has hinted that the BSA would accept a curriculum on UVA slave history that takes place outside the classroom, a ceremony like convocation being just one example. But she stands firm on the importance of making it required.
I believe that in order to ensure that everyone is on board to be progressive and make a change at UVA, you have to make it mandatory.
The Student Council, meanwhile, has signed on to the BSA's fifth demand and set up what's called the Required Education Research Committee to bring a concrete proposal to the university. I'm Yahya Abou-Ghazala. Back to you, Mary and Liz.
Unite the Right rally, the Dave Matthews Band announced that they would put on a free concert for Charlottesville to benefit the victims of the August violence. Liz, you attended the concert and spoke to some students and Charlottesville residents.
I did, and they were incredibly uplifted by this concert, and I just couldn't resist digging into the background of the Dave Matthews Band when doing this story.
Great, well, let's watch.
Charlottesville resident Justin Holder needed this concert after witnessing chaos on August 11th and 12th. Members of the KKK, counter-protesters, and news reporters were among many of the characters that climbed into his car while driving for Uber.
It didn't end up being like a happy, fun day. Like, nobody was smiling. Like, there was no smiles on anybody's faces. And that's probably the saddest thing.
About a month and a half ago, the Unite the Right rally and the ensuing violence sparked tragedy throughout Charlottesville. Today is about positivity.
You see a lot of smiles. You see a lot of teeth, and that's because they're smiling, unlike that day.
Ann Kingston, who manages charitable appearances for the Dave Matthews Band, said Matthews knew he had to unite Charlottesville as soon as hate hit home.
Everybody feels wounded by what happened, but we see this as an opportunity to turn it around and let's do our part to do what we can here in Charlottesville, which is put on a show, raise some funds, do things locally, do things nationally to do our part.
But why is this such a big deal that Dave Matthews Band, who, they're from Charlottesville, are coming back here home to put on this concert for the town?
Grew up here, they have such deep roots here, and it just felt like an obvious decision to do a concert and bring everybody together.
So this is where it all started. Dave Matthews himself was a bartender here downtown at Miller's in 1990 when he started recruiting local musicians for his band.
I remember Dave Matthews from before he got famous when he was playing at Trax and Max downtown on Main Street. I was like 18 years old when he was first singing and stuff.
I'm excited for this concert. We're just trying to gauge what everyone's feeling.
Music brings everybody together.
Anthony Hughes has lived in Charlottesville all his life, while Jillian DeWoody moved to the city last fall when she enrolled at UVA. Despite their different backgrounds, both Hughes and DeWoody believe in the unifying power of the concert.
I know students got random tickets, so you won't necessarily be in the same section as one of your friends, so it'll kind of be like meeting new people, like bringing the community together in that way.
Anytime it's a concert and good music, everybody gets down. It doesn't even matter.
Charlottesville. Right. The opening ceremony of the Bicentennial is running a little late and just coming to a close. So we're going to take a quick break. But when we come back, expect a live interview on set with some special guests. University President Teresa Sullivan and co-chairman of the Bicentennial Committee, Bobby Battle. Thank you so much for watching. Check back in a Thank you guys again for joining us. Unfortunately, there's been some miscommunication with the university president's office, but we're so glad you all joined us this evening.
We would like to thank all of you for being a part of our first Facebook Live broadcast this afternoon. We'd also like to thank our guest, Tucker Wilson, as well as our correspondents, crew, and Professor Wyatt Andrews.
We leave you all now to enjoy the Bicentennial kickoff. This has been a production of the UVA College Media Studies Department. I'm Liz Brown-Kaiser.
And I'm Mary Rockwell.
Thanks for watching. Go